Hi guys, now in 2011 the government introduced a grant to incentivise people into electric cars. It was £4,500 towards a full electric car and £2,500 towards a hybrid. That has recently changed, so it's now £3,500 towards a full electric vehicle and zero towards a hybrid. They've got rid of the grant for hybrids completely. Now, a lot of people in the motoring industry and the EV community as a whole have said that this has been a bad move and it de-incentivises people into getting an electric car. But of course we know the public purse isn't infinite. The money has to come from somewhere. So is this move justifiable? That is basically what I'm trying to find out in this video. And to do so, I've spoke to many different dealerships, different manufacturers and lots of people as a whole to try and see if it's had any effect on them getting into an EV. Now, as I've just said, it's all about incentivization. People needed to be incentivized financially to get into one of the very early electric cars, because let's face it, no one knew anything about them. They were very new, they were producing small numbers, a lot more expensive, so it kind of made sense. That was 7 years ago, and the EV world has changed massively since then. So has this incentive been reduced to the point where it's actually going to affect people to the point where they won't then look at one or won't then buy one? I've spoken to nearly half a dozen different dealers from different manufacturers who sell different EVs and asked them basically, since this grant was introduced, what effect, if any, has it had on their sales and interest in EVs? Now, I have to say the overwhelming response, in fact the same response from all dealers, whether it's I think it was Renault, Hyundai, BMW, Nissan, I forget the fifth, but basically they all said the same thing. The interest in EVs and the sales of EVs, forgetting any seasonal differences, is basically exactly the same. It's exactly what they would have expected to achieve anyway, whether the grant had been reduced or removed or whatever. So to dealers, it's not changed anything. It appears it's had no effect at all by reducing the grant on EVs and of course removing the grant on hybrids. Now we're going to separate the full electric and hybrid topic for a minute, so I'm going to concentrate on the full electric cars for a second. Certainly compared to 2011, prices of full EVs have come down massively. Yes, you're going to say that the prices right now are basically the same or even slightly higher than they were in 2011, but what you've got to remember is that back then you got maybe a 24 kilowatt hour battery. Now for roughly the same price, things like the Kona are coming with a 64, I think it is, kilowatt hour battery. So even though the prices haven't come down, you're getting nearly 3 times the amount of batteries, which is a massive cost in EV terms, for the same price. So they have come down. Battery prices have come down massively. So that has to be taken into account as well. The financial incentive is probably needed less because cars are so much cheaper to produce. And another argument that's I think we just have to mention is the fact that almost every EV out there has a massive wait time. The Kona, for example, even though they are increasing production, at the moment if you ordered one you're looking like August before you get it. It's December right now. Even if you get something that's a lot more common and easier to get like a Zoe, you're probably looking at least a month, maybe longer, for a factory order. When you're constantly selling out of something, incentivization isn't really needed as much, I suppose. Now don't get me wrong, 99.9% certain my next car will be a full electric vehicle. I would love to have an extra £1,000 knocked off that car. I'm not an idiot, it's human nature to want things for free or for cheaper. But in the grand scheme of things, when you look at public purses, public money, it's not really needed, is it? There are a lot of electric cars out there now compared to back then. They're a lot cheaper to produce than they were back then. And ultimately, it's not affecting sales. I would say, I'm sorry guys, but it is perfectly justified to have reduced the grant to £3,500 from £4,500 for EVs, because ultimately money is tight at the moment and it's obviously not had an effect. They do not need that incentivization anymore, to that level anyway, to buy an EV. In fact, one dealer said the only people that he's noticed have really complained about this are those that looked at an EV when the grant was higher, didn't put an order in, and now the price has gone up. So I'm sorry guys, in terms of the full EV grant, I think we have to say it's a perfectly justifiable thing to have reduced it. It's not made any difference at all. EVs are in demand, there's a waiting list for most of them. Sorry, guys. Oh, crap, I have to pick my daughter up. Did Daddy nearly forget to pick you up and go swimming?
Yes.
Dad of the year. I'm afraid sometimes I have to put YouTube ahead of you. Right, go away, bugger off, shoo. Go on. Right, let's talk about hybrid, because this is a bit of a divisive issue in the EV community. Not so much is the grant being removed a positive or a negative thing, but whether or not hybrids in the first place need to exist anymore. Now, the problem people typically have with hybrids is that the ultimate end game for the UK and most countries around the world now is to eradicate the combustion engine completely in the next 20, 30, 40 years, whatever. It's all different time frames. But ultimately, that's the goal, to have no more combustion engines in private cars. So the only way you can do that is obviously by incentivising things like full electric ones. A hybrid still has a combustion engine. So why would you incentivise something that you want to ultimately get rid of? Even though it's a better stopgap, is it worth incentivising something that you're then ultimately going to probably de-incentivise 10 years from now? So this, I think, has had a significant part as to why the grant has been removed from hybrids, because ultimately they're not really needed anymore. Now, in 2011, when this grant started, you had a 60-70 mile Leaf and a couple of small Citroen and whatnot. Was it the Peugeot and Citroen C0, I think it was, to choose from. So basically, you're looking at 60-70 mile ranges, excluding Teslas, of course, to choose from. So a hybrid was a viable option back then. So ultimately, when you're looking at something that can do 300 miles, a hybrid, even for those that have problems charging, isn't so much a good option anymore. And then, of course, you've got the problem of hybrids, for me, are the wrong way around. There's only one hybrid, or there's only one car, should I say, that I would consider a proper hybrid that's done the right way around. And even this is getting phased out next year in the UK, and that is the BMW i3 with the range extender. You have, which for me is the best way of doing a hybrid, a big range battery with a petrol backup, rather than a 20-mile range battery on average and then let petrol do the rest. It doesn't make sense. If you're going to use a lot of short journeys and electric drive, then make that the primary one and have the petrol as a backup. So for me, the best hybrid in the world is the i3 with a range extender. Now, of course, there are exceptions. Some people will think, well, I do lots of short journeys and occasional long ones. So hybrids can make sense for some, but as a whole, looking at the big picture, they've kind of been surpassed now. The need for a hybrid, in my opinion, isn't there anymore, beyond making like a really cool sports car or ridiculously fast LaFerrari, McLaren, Porsche 918, all those. That's a hybrid, but ultimately, in general terms, I don't see the point of a hybrid anymore. I really don't. I remember talking to quite a few people actually, but one particularly sticks in mind. And he said that he got about 200 miles per gallon out of his plug-in hybrid. I think it was an Outlander. And he said, well, basically he does lots of short journeys. 5 miles there, 5 miles there, 5 miles there. Plugs it in at any opportunity he gets, and there's a lot in his area. So ultimately, he's almost always running on electric. It's just he does lots of short journeys, probably 30 miles a day most. And then I said, well, why don't you just get a full electric car then if you're always just doing these short journeys that can do like 100 miles? And he stopped and went, I don't know. They're not needed anymore. For me, the only reason to get a hybrid right now is to replace a diesel in economy terms. So anyway, to kind of recap, you've got the sales aren't being dented. The interest, according to the dealers, in hybrid, again, hasn't changed at all since this grant was removed. You've got the fact that a lot of people don't think hybrids are necessary anymore because the range of electric cars is skyrocketing. I mean, another 5 years. Look what's happened in 7 years. 60, 70 miles to 300 miles as an average of the new cars coming out. In another 5 years, 10 years, who knows? So there's a lot of arguments that hybrids just aren't necessary anymore for the vast majority of people out there. Coupled with the fact that the sales and interest hasn't gone down, and the ultimate goal is to get rid of the petrol engine completely for most countries, probably every country eventually. I guess I've got to say it again. The removal of the hybrid grant is completely justified, and probably, I would say a lot of people agree. So, to recap, basically, I think I've just agreed with a government. Now, ultimately, to me, it doesn't really matter who's in charge. They're all a bunch of dickheads. But, in this case, I would think that most people would agree it was a justifiable move to reduce the grant on an EV. Some people would probably say they could reduce it even more and it still won't make a difference. And removing the grant on hybrids as well, perfectly justified. So, what do you think? Do you agree with me? That's what the comments are for. I should say, there's a lot of people that don't seem to know how YouTube works. The like and dislike buttons aren't for saying yes or no when I ask a question. That's not what they're there for. They're there to say if you like the video or not. If you want to agree or disagree with me, that's what the comments are for. But what I will do is put a link in the description below for the first 3 or 4 days that this video is up to a Twitter poll. So you can say whether you agree or disagree with what the government have done, basically. So look in the description below. It'll be there'll be a link to a Twitter poll for at least a few days anyway, and then answer that. So that'll give us a good snapshot of what's going on. If you want to say anything else, then use the comments, of course, and give your situation. So if you say, well, I was looking at a full electric car, now I'm not so sure because the extra £1,000 tipped the balance, or I was looking at a hybrid and now I'm not, or I was looking at an electric car and it's made no difference at all to me. So give us your situation and what you think. So there we have it. I've nearly forgot my daughter, done a video. It's been a good day. Right, remember to click the subscribe button below because everybody says that at the end of a YouTube video. Click the like button because they say that as well. And as always, thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.